Okay, welcome. And thank you for joining us on this LinkedIn live stream, Connecting the Future CPaaS Insights. I'm Jean-Paul Small, Editor-in-Chief of Content at Sinch, and today we'll be diving deep into the current state of CPaaS, discussing market insights, the latest trends driving adoption, and much more. Joining me today, all the way from Australia, is Pamela Clark-Dickson, Principal Analyst at Omdia and one of the authors of the Omdia Universe 2023-24 CPaaS Providers Report. Thanks for joining today, Pamela. How you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. Thanks for having me. I am looking forward to the discussion.
Great. Now, for our live audience, please leave any questions you have in the chat, and we'll try to reserve some time to answer them at the end of the live stream. Shall we begin?
Sure,
Uh,
let's go.
okay. Well, Pamela, let's start with a two-part question. First,
Mhm.
can you provide an overview on the current state of the CPaaS market, starting from its inception to where we stand now? And secondly, what are some of the key factors driving the growth of the CPaaS industry?
Sure. So if we go to the first slide here, um, so CPaaS has become a very rich market, I believe, in terms of the technology capabilities that CPaaS vendors such as Sinch are providing. When it first started back in sort of the 2000s, the objective of CPaaS, or cloud communications as it was called back then, was simply to connect enterprises with messaging, mostly SMS and voice, um, and to enable them to more easily add these capabilities into their back-end systems so that they could communicate with their customers. Um, so it was at that stage primarily developer oriented, aimed at sort of early adopters in the tech space, and really, it was all about that democratization of access. At that point, if an enterprise wanted to connect to a consumer, they had to go through, say, an SMS aggregator or a telco. It was a lengthy and time-consuming process. But by enabling communications APIs, CPaaS providers were able to make that process a lot easier for developers and enterprises. Um, so as I said, it sort of started out with only a sort of a few basic services, and the kinds of companies that were in that space were mainly sort of cloud communications natives. So there's a list of vendors there on the slide that, it was a small list, and we've seen a lot of activity in that space since then, with Nexmo being bought by Vonage, and then Vonage being bought by Ericsson. So as we got into the early 2010s, we started to see a period of growth there in CPaaS. So more communications APIs were added, more capabilities were added on the network side, number verification, for example, SIP trunking for voice. And we started to see SMS aggregators, connectivity service providers, enterprise software vendors, and others entering the market, because what happened was that this approach, this use of communications APIs to connect for enterprises to connect to consumers, it got real resonance in the market. It was starting to be adopted and used on a wide scale, and so that attracted a lot of new entrants into the market. CPaaS vendors started to target enterprises as well as developers, and there was a lot of expansion of use cases across different segmentations and across organizations, looking into going into different departments within the organization. So, someone, a department within an organization might add SMS capability for appointment reminders, and then once that use case was proven in one department, it was expanded out to others. And we started to see this addition of channels as well. So we started to see the addition of video, messaging apps, email, and again, sort of looking into the number verification, very important sort of capability in this space in terms of reducing things like spam, making sure that messages are getting through for enterprises. That's key, that they are able to ensure that they are communicating with the right customer. We started to see the rise of omnichannel, so organizations wanting to use more than one channel and use that in an orchestrated fashion, and this emergence of a partnership ecosystem as well. Across a number of different areas, whether that was sort of getting into different technology platforms to fill out any sort of gaps in the portfolio, working with ISVs on that, maybe working with different channel partners in different geographies to be able to expand the capabilities, in a much quicker fashion. And then from the late 2000s, we started to see some real, forward movement. I mean, not that there hadn't been up until then, but looking at adding adjacencies into CPaaS. So again, more APIs, more comms capabilities, expansion of geographic networks, lots of M&A starting to happen in order to enable that. We started to see applications being developed and offered as a package horizontally, so looking into sales and marketing, but also looking across vertical industries as well. We started to see this move into adjacent platforms, or a consolidation of this move into adjacent platforms, contact centers, unified comms, customer engagement platforms, customer data platforms, and then because it's important to be able to connect as an enterprise with the systems that you already have. This orchestration element came in as well. So there was a lot more richness, I believe, added to the CPaaS portfolio, sort of starting from the mid to late 2010s. And then as we move into the 2020s, we're starting to see this differentiation, move to differentiate, starting to accelerate, and innovation starting to come in, more innovation starting to come in here as well. The CPaaS market has become quite crowded with players now, as I mentioned, connectivity service providers, SMS aggregators, all these companies that were previously identified as a different kind of player started to identify themselves as CPaaS players. Enterprise software vendors added in a CPaaS capability to their platform, so they could offer that as well. Sometimes partnering, sometimes developing their own, and so there's, but in that becomes a very competitive market, and in order to survive and thrive and to enter, that requires some level of innovation. So there is this innovation in go-to-market strategies, so looking at new target markets, for example, starting to get into the platforms, the hyperscalers, working more with telcos. In the technology space, we're starting to see a bit of movement with regards to network APIs and generative AI. And then in the partnership space, that area is just exploding as well. A lot of uh, um, players such as Sinch have, an extensive partnership network. So there's just the way that the CPaaS market has developed since I first started covering it, back in that late 2000, early 2010s. It's just been, incredible to see the amount of activity, and I guess that. The willingness and the desire to innovate, to add value for enterprise customers, because that's what it's become about. It's gone beyond just merely enabling communications for enterprise customers. It's about supporting that whole customer experience for enterprise customers. Um, so if we go to the next slide, unless you have any sort of follow-up questions there, Jean-Paul.
No, that's okay. I'll save my questions for now, but that was a great synopsis and to catch us up to date on where we are right now.
Sure. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I've moved on a bit. So this, I won't probably dwell on this slide for too much, but this gives you an indication of just how many players there are in the CPaaS market, and where they've come from when they entered. It's busy, and even up until 2023 when we saw Rakuten enter with its Symphony platform. You can see where they've come from. As I said, previously, companies that were SMS aggregators and connectivity service providers are in there. They've pivoted to CPaaS. We've got the enterprise software vendors, that are coming in. A couple of so we've got, I guess, Ring Central in there from the the comm space. Avaya, Azure is in there. Mavenir, obviously, Sinch is further along in 2019, but obviously Sinch has been around for a lot longer than that. You guys have done a lot of acquisition as well, which has really broadened and strengthened your CPaaS portfolio. And even just in the last couple of years, we've got companies like BIX, global sort of connectivity service providers coming in. Proximus bought Route Mobile just last year. So we're seeing activity from telcos as well. And even telco alliances, for example, up in Asia, you've got the Bridge Alliance that are doing some work in the CPaaS area too. So, the CPaaS market has really expanded out into a number of different kinds of players, all sort of looking at that opportunity to be able to connect their enterprise customers in a richer way with communication services, and then supporting that or adding to that with um, sort of customer experience oriented platforms. So
I did have a quick
just
question, actually,
yeah.
about this. Well, with such a crowded kind of marketplace, is there any one attribute that you feel that a CPaaS provider would have that would actually provide a competitive advantage or differentiate for amongst the competitors, um, amongst the other competitors, excuse me?
Um, Oh, look, there are a number of things. I mean, obviously, the ability to provide the underlying communications capabilities, that communications network is key to um, to provide a sort of a global capability in the customer experience space to support that. Um, and to have that network also be a high quality network. Trying to avoid sort of scenarios for customers that they want to enterprise customers want to make sure that their traffic is delivered, whether that's voice or SMS or messaging app. So a community, a really solid and global, if possible, communications network is key, particularly for larger players. Um, and then being competitive from a technology perspective, um, looking if a CPaaS provider is looking to support enterprises with customer engagement platforms and customer data platforms and so forth. So then the next, keeping up with the addition of AI and analytics, data analytics, that helps to create these hyper personalized engagement experience for enterprises to engage with their customers, having that capability across multiple communications APIs, getting into the messaging app space is going to be key, and I know we'll talk about that in a little while as well. Just having, for global players, having that really solid communications underlying infrastructure, and then being able to layer in as much as possible on top of that, just to provide your enterprise customers with everything that they need from the one place. And then the partnership ecosystem, like that, there are such a lot of things that are so key, I believe, to CPaaS providers. You obviously have some CPaaS providers that have different go-to-market strategies. They may just want to concentrate on a particular geographic market, or provide a solid experience in terms of one or two communication services. But I think, as a global CPaaS provider, being able to offer, as you know, as much as possible to support enterprises is in as many markets as possible, is also very important. Um, so that, there's no one thing, I guess. Just keeping up with all the developments that are happening. Being across AI, for example, I think looking at where the possible opportunities are there, to make that customer experience more engaging and more fulfilling for an enterprise's end user customers, is going to be important going forward, I believe.
Great.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, so I'm sort of talking about it here. So if we're looking at AI and generative AI being playing an increasing, so these are kind of the five sort of key trends in CPaaS that we're looking at the moment. So AI and generative AI, I've already sort of referred to. So that's that, we're seeing a lot of partnership in this area, with AI engines and with vendors, to integrate AI and generative AI into CPaaS platforms. And that I guess is we've seen the democratization of communications. I think that CPaaS vendors may have a role to play here in the democratization of AI and generative AI in particular. As I'll sort of go through in a later slide, we know that CPaaS vendors have already been using AI, in a sense, in their networks for a while. So generative AI is just for those CPaaS vendors that are offering customer engagement platforms. This is just going to add an extra layer in terms of the consumer engagement space. We'll see that SMS for the moment is going to remain resilient as a customer communications channel. There is sort of no other channel just now which has that universal capability offered on all telco networks, on all devices. To simple channel for enterprises to wrap their heads around, to onboard. It's a very utilitarian channel for things like appointment reminders and one-time passcodes and so on. So for those reasons, we'll see it remain quite resilient for some time yet. But we are seeing this growing use of messaging apps by enterprises as well, and that's a function of the widespread high penetration of messaging apps globally. We'll start to see that start to increase, simply because enterprises will want to engage with their customers on the channels that their customers are on. And again, CPaaS vendors have a role to play here in making that easier for enterprises to onboard. We'll start to see these intelligently executed customer data strategies starting to come to the fore. So a lot of CPaaS vendors have gone up that communication, up their product stack from communications to consumer engagement. So logically, the next step has been to add a customer data platform, whether through acquisition or internal development or partnership. And so those platforms are going to help enterprises to more quickly and effectively generate and distribute targeted marketing campaigns, for example. And then finally, we've seen M&A be quite a key trend in the last few years. CPaaS vendors are building that global presence. They're widening their communication networks. They're expanding into adjacent technologies, such as AI and customer engagement platforms and customer data platforms. So we've seen about 18 billion outlaid on M&A over the last sort of 8 years or so, since 2016, and even just in the last year, we saw more of that, almost another billion. With Tata Communications and Tanla Platforms and Proximus Opal sort of acquiring Clearer, and then Value First India, and a majority stake in Route Mobile, for respectively. So those are probably the five sort of key trends that we've seen in the market over the last few years, and these will still play a role, over the coming years.
Excellent. Well, thank
Okay.
you. Thanks for the thorough answer. Yeah, well, you touched a little bit on kind of the inception of omnichannel offerings with CPaaS, I think starting around 2008 or so. And
Yeah.
I know that CPaaS really solutions really power these kind of omni-channel customer engagement capabilities, which is a real brand differentiator across industries.
Mm,
Can
yeah.
you maybe touch on and explain how omni-channel capabilities kind of help orchestrate and unify these customer interactions?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I'll just put up a slide here, just to play in the background as to why omnichannel is so important in CPaaS, because this comes from our digital consumer insights survey. It's the most recent data from 2022. Um, and so this is looking at how consumers interact with service providers across a range of use cases and communications channels. And as you can see, um, there are a number of communications channels that are used across all of these use cases. For an enterprise, being able to have an omni-channel capability to communicate with their customers, it's so important, simply because eh, not all of their customers will want to be interacted with in different ways depending on their preferred communications channel. And that can be age related, or that can be situational in terms of where the customer is at a particular point in time. They may not be at home, so they'll be on their mobile. Um, they might just want to use SMS. For a particular use case. A conversation with a customer might start out perhaps online with web chat, and then adding in a different capabilities depending on how the conversation goes. If you have to you get a verification code that's going to be sent out to you via SMS, perhaps in the same conversation. Um, you might get, if you're getting a new mobile phone contract, that might be sent out to you as an email. You might need to switch to a voice call sometime during the chat, because something needs to be, discussed at a deeper level, and maybe your customer feels more comfortable, chatting with you via voice. Or if you're in a troubleshooting situation, you might want to have a couple of channels on the go at the same time. So being able to offer the ability to communicate via SMS, via voice, perhaps via video, depending on the use case, via messaging app if you've got a younger cohort of customers, and you're able to offer, say, a WhatsApp or a Facebook Messenger capability. Your younger cohort may prefer that, or may prefer that for a different type of use case, for marketing, perhaps, for example. You might want to add in a poll, or something, which is sent out via SMS after, say, a troubleshooting session, to provide feedback on how the conversation went from a customer service point of view. So yeah, that it's an incredibly important capability for CPaaS providers to be able to offer their enterprise customers, simply to be able to tap into all of those communication channels, and to be able to do that seamlessly for the customer is also quite important as well. You don't want that sort of being, uh, sort of difficult to switch from one communications channel to another.
Right. That's
Mm.
great. I see that there's messaging apps are included here, and I guess it's from this as the data is a little bit from 2022, but the messaging apps themselves have been on the rise
Mm.
lately, and I guess that leads us kind of into our next question. Maybe Pamela, why do you think alternative messaging apps such as WhatsApp, Viber, Telegram, and etc. have become such relevant channels for businesses to engage with their customers?
Mm.
And kind of secondarily, what do you think the impact of Apple's support of RCS will be for the mobile business messaging market as well?
Yeah. So messaging apps obviously are important because they are so widely penetrated. So this probably gives a better view of where that's at the moment. So again, this sort of comes from one of our products, our uh, messaging apps tracker, where we look at how many monthly active users selected messaging apps have across the world. Um, and the meta properties obviously dominate. WhatsApp is very dominant globally, but obviously you have in some markets, particularly in Asia, local messaging apps which are far and away ahead of the global apps in terms of their ability to enable enterprises to engage with consumers. Um, but we've seen in some markets, for example, Indonesia, Malaysia, Brazil, South Africa, WhatsApp penetration is above 80%, and in some of those markets, it's above 90. So
Mhm.
for enterprises, it's about reach. It's about being able to communicate with your customers on the platform that they're on. What that means for the CPaaS providers is enabling that reach for the enterprise customers, because it's not as a lot of enterprises, I feel, maybe not so much in the markets I've just mentioned, where there's perhaps a lot of use of WhatsApp for small business, using WhatsApp for Business, the Android messaging app. But once you start to get to other markets where there's more fragmentation, where WhatsApp may be used along Facebook Messenger, a key way that CPaaS providers can facilitate that is through their APIs, helping enterprises to onboard. And so that's why we obviously have a lot of CPaaS vendors, for example, partnering with Meta and other companies to make that easier for their enterprise customers. And the other element to add in here is the feature richness, I suppose, of what can be achieved on a messaging app versus what can be achieved via SMS. As I mentioned before, SMS is a beautiful channel for utilitarian purposes. You just want to send a quick text message, you want to send an appointment reminder. For example, you want your customer, or say, for example, a patient, to be able to answer yes or no. And that's very useful. But when it comes to messaging apps, you can make that a more engaging experience for consumers. You can add in images, you can add in video, you can enable payments. So that's what's happening, and that's where it's heading. Because I think the global messaging apps will follow what's happening in places like China and South Korea and Japan, where we already are seeing that level of interactivity between enterprises and consumers. It's just going to get richer, but enterprises are going to need help with that. Um, so yeah, the second question was about, excuse me, about RCS. Yeah, so we've obviously seen Google Messages helping to get RCS to over 1 billion users via Android messages. And excitingly, coming later in the year, Apple is going to enable the same for iMessage users. Um, that is going to be incredibly important from a telco messaging point of view, because RCS is being positioned as the successor, the much richer messaging successor to SMS. And we're already seeing that RCS is returning higher engagement rates, higher click through than SMS across certain use cases. It can certainly offer consumers a lot more, and enterprises a lot more, in terms of being able to engage with their consumers. They can offer a messaging app like experience, and you know having that cross-platform capability for RCS is going to be so important that hopefully that is what is going to happen. The last sort of official announcement we saw from Apple was that they would enable that as more of an SMS and an MMS fallback. But if they also enable support for RCS business messaging, um, that will really push sort of a telco based um, just messaging, richer messaging service forward quite a lot, and open up that capability for that to be just there on consumers' phones. They won't have to necessarily download anything. Anyone, for so far as Google Messages is concerned, we already have that as the default messaging app on Android devices. iMessage is obviously default on Apple devices. And so that is just going to be that sort of green button experience, I suppose, for rich messaging, which has been the promise of RCS for so many years, but not quite realized. And still, we still are waiting on Apple to enable that. So it's still not going to be realized until later this year. But once that happens, I think that changes the game significantly for RCS and for RCS business messaging, potentially, assuming that Apple does support the business messaging capability in RCS.
Right. Now, would you would in your opinion, would you say that with that, assuming that Apple's adoption goes through later this year, that would negatively affect the SMS? As you mentioned, SMS, it's easy to use, it's widely adopted across the planet. Now, with those added capabilities, would that necessarily make SMS obsolete if RCS is more widely adopted?
I don't think it'll make SMS obsolete, at least in the short to medium term. I think there will be a process of migration for enterprises. I also think that SMS has use cases for which it is more suited, I guess, than RCS. But it is. It is something that telcos have uh, it's not so much struggle with, I'd say, but wanting, that's been what the GSM Association, its objective has been with RCS, to offer that richer messaging experience, but to enable it as a telco-based richer messaging experience. But it's taken Google and now Apple, to actually get that out onto consumers' devices. Um, and so, these companies are actually facilitating that capability for telcos. So, um, I mean, there will be some migration. I mean, that was, the intention, I guess, all along for the telcos. They just unfortunately weren't able to execute on it as effectively as Google and hopefully Apple have been able to so far. And we anticipate, will be able to. I mean, iPhones, there's probably another billion of those in the market, all supporting iMessage. So when Apple comes on board, you've suddenly got an addressable market for RCS of about 2 billion. So that's starting to get up into WhatsApp territory.
Mm.
So yeah, there's no question, I think, that it will change the game somewhat for SMS. I don't expect that impact to be immediate or to be dramatic, but it will start to happen. And we've been sort of saying to telcos, well, what is your next step after SMS? Because the messaging apps are coming, and we've seen that happening over the last couple of years on a global basis. Obviously, they're already there in countries such as China and South Korea and Japan. But interestingly, even in markets at the moment, from our digital consumer insights, where we've seen this huge penetration of messaging apps, there's still quite a lot of use of SMS. So that's what leads me to believe that, um, it's not going to be an overnight fall off for SMS. I think there is still some life in that market from a business messaging perspective for a few years yet. Businesses are going to take a while to wrap their heads around it as well. But they will get there, simply because it can provide a much richer messaging experience for some use cases than for SMS. Um, yeah, so certainly for person to person SMS, we've seen dramatic declines in some markets as a result of the penetration of messaging apps. So, but that again, messaging apps have been around for like 10 years, more, 13 years, and we still have person-to-person SMS as still being, quite a significant market in terms of traffic and revenue. So, yeah, I wouldn't write SMS off just yet, either in the consumer or the business messaging space.
Great. Thank you.
Mm. Thanks, John.
Earlier and in your the Omdia Universe report on the state of the CPaaS market,
Mm,
you talked about a little bit about how CPaaS vendors have kind of leveraged AI's predictive capabilities in their platform, and now
mm,
many are using generative AI to add those capabilities to offerings. Can you
mm,
discuss a little bit how the integration of AI and machine learning and large language models has impacted the CPaaS market?
mm. Um, yeah, so as I mentioned before, CPaaS vendors have already been integrating AI capabilities, but as you mentioned, machine learning, natural language processing, and so forth, natural language understanding in the form of sentiment analysis. Um, so these are being used to not only in a customer facing sort of perspective, but also in an underlying platform perspective. So um, being able to use machine learning to help direct or to route traffic, for example, but then also looking at different AI capabilities to help enhance that customer experience. So, being able to recognize words, understand the meaning of the words, so that is the underlying technology for things like chatbots or voice bots, and then being able to escalate inquiries or queries or concerns to a human agent, using sentiment analysis or just as a result of the journey tree, I suppose. If a chatbot or a voice bot is unable to resolve the request, there's usually that kind of signaling on the during the menu of the conversation to say, okay, well, let's have you speak to a human agent. Um, so these kinds of capabilities are useful to enterprises from a customer engagement perspective because they can automate part of that journey, and that is also useful for customers as well to a certain extent. Um, if they can self-serve in terms of being able to find answers to a query or be redirected to a website where they'll be able to find answers to the query, it takes cost out of an enterprise's uh, contact center, and I think takes frustration out of the equation for consumers, while at the same time safeguarding against having a negative customer experience by allowing human agents still to be part of that process. Um, so yeah, it's something that is already being used. We're seeing this being used in data analytics as well, and for recommendation engines, for example. So if as an enterprise you want to recommend a particular product or service based on what you already know about the customer, that can be enabled by customer data platforms, or other platforms that use AI to underpin data analytics. And then obviously we've got the low code, sort of no code element in there as well from a platform perspective, helping enterprises to more efficiently, I guess, build those customer journeys too. So it's already being used extensively, but I guess what is potentially exciting is what can happen with generative AI and using these large language models. And again, it's still fairly early stages here, I guess you could say, but um, uh, and it's something again that enterprises need to wrap their heads around. Um, and again, it's something I think that CPaaS vendors can help them to do in terms of perhaps providing these sorts of platforms for them, or providing products that can enable them to access these kinds of capabilities. So, having an internal access to, like, an internal sort of large language model, not the whole chat GPT, for example. So things like, we can see it here in terms of what that means. We'll have more intelligent automation. We'll have these generative omnichannel engagements, generative agents, and assist. For example, on the customer engagement platform, uh, you know, um, more routing intelligence. Um, you know, Using customer data platforms to help train an enterprise LLM, so as to be able to build those campaigns. So, I mean, this might have an impact on, say, a marketing, a marketing, a product development sort of a function, in that it might enable more resources behind that function to come up with sort of campaigns that are uniquely targeted. And this is where we start to get into some of that hyper personalization, bringing together the value of the customer data platform with the customer engagement platform to send out campaigns to a customer that are uniquely targeted to an individual, even, or to a small group of customers, based on what is known about the customer. So we're starting to get into some of that marketing automation in there as well. Looking at what can happen in the contact center. We start to see again these generative agents, and assistants. So yeah, so there's a and obviously chatbots are in there as well. Just being able to make them much more intelligent, and rather than reactive, more proactive, and to some extent that's happening now. But I think using these large language models and generative AI will make that just a more sophisticated and more efficient process. But it again, I don't believe that's the sort of thing that is going to happen overnight, but it is certainly in the pipeline, and we're seeing some organisations start to explore what what they can do in these areas using generative AI.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's great. We're just gonna keep moving right along. The time is
Mm.
just flying by here.
Yeah, yeah, I've been keeping an eye on time too.
Yeah, that's kind of right. I think it's time for a little bit of navel gazing on our part. In your analysis of the global CPaaS providers, you did name Sinch as one of the leaders. Could you just
Mm.
elaborate a little bit on kind of the competitive differentiators that set Sinch apart in the CPaaS
Mm.
market?
Yeah, yeah. So Cinch has a number of competitive differentiators. Did very well in our Omdia universe. It sort of led, or it jointly led, in six categories there. Um, and these included your APIs, your value-added services and package solutions, innovation, go-to-market, number of customers, non-functional requirements, which relates to the performance of things like network and SLAs and so forth, and implementation services. So, just looking at, some of, for example, your super network, I think, as part of the Cinch customer communications cloud. So the geographic reach of that, and its ability to deliver, I think it's something like 200 billion messages, 390 billion emails, 300 billion voice minutes. I mean, the scale, the ability to support that scale, I guess, is a key differentiator. The number of developers you have using the developer platform, the breadth of APIs that you provide. I mean, just in your conversation API, I think you support something like 13 different messaging channels. And then moving, you obviously you have those packaged applications as well. So across both horizontal and vertical. Looking at your customer data capabilities and customer engagement platforms, sales, for example. You've got a solution, or Sinch has got a solution for that. So yeah, that having that uh, sort of a global reach, so that we're the fact that that is one of the reasons why you've got cloud vendors sort of integrating your customer communications cloud into their own platforms. I guess another factor was looking at profitability as well, so that obviously gives Sinch the ability to chart its own directory, more freedom in the CPaaS market. Um, and one of the things that helps avoid the headwinds that we've seen, perhaps other CPaaS vendors experiencing, having to control costs through in various ways. So looking at working with enterprises on a co-creation basis as well through the partnership system, moving into AI, obviously through the acquisition of ChatLayer, you've now got that capability, and have been able to sort of um, provide that already. So if I move to the next slide, I think I've got a slide on what that enables. So yeah, so this is underpinning, as I say, your conversational AI platform. So enabling Sinch to create those chatbots and those voice bots that can be used on the Engage customer platform. The integration capabilities that you have with third-party platforms. The smart conversations piece, the chat GPT integration, the search engine. So yeah, the Cinch, as I say, performed quite strongly across a number of our different sort of assessment areas, and as you might know, we sent out a questionnaire covering 9 or 10 different categories that we required our vendor participants to provide us with information with, and as I say, Cinch performs strongly, across a number of those areas. So, yeah. Quite a lot of differentiating factors there for Cinch, which has resulted in its achieving that high position in our Omdia universe for 2023-24.
Yeah, I might be biased, but I totally agree with your assessment. um, but that's fantastic. We are now down to the last 10 minutes, Pamela, and I'd love
Gosh,
to
that's gone
actually take
quickly.
some. I went very quickly. I'd love to
Mm,
take some questions from our audience in the chat.
mm,
So if you just give me 1 second, I'm going to pull some up here.
sure.
So yeah, this is from Paul R. Rupert. Um,
Hi,
his,
Paul.
yeah, hi Paul. His question is, what are the indicating trend lines of migration to WhatsApp in the North American market? Is it marginal incremental growth or significant at this point to erode enterprise SMS in North America?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I mean, obviously, Meta has been pushing WhatsApp in North America as an alternative, I believe, to SMS from the perspective of uh, uh, um, spam, and is being a more secure platform, and one that kind of helps to prevent spam, and through its new pricing structures that Meta introduced last year as well, obviously making it easier for enterprises to onboard with WhatsApp. I still think at the moment, though, again, it's it's starting to happen in terms of the penetration of WhatsApp as a messaging channel for enterprises in the US. But I still think that enterprise SMS at the moment is still strong in North America, and will remain so for the short to medium term. Um, Thanks, Paul. I just read Paul's additional comment there in the chat. So yeah, I think you know it's probably still got a while to go before it gets to that as high a level of penetration. But interestingly, I think that uh, according to our last digital consumer insights, we still have that um, sort of where we have Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp and iMessage all very popular in North America, or at least in the US. I think, though, in our last survey, we saw a swap between Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp. So previous years, Facebook Messenger was more dominant, but I think now that WhatsApp has kind of taken over and in the US, or at least pulled ahead in terms of penetration. Um, and with Meta looking to monetize WhatsApp, I think that its penetration and use as a business messaging channel will only increase. So yeah, thanks for the question. I hope that answers.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And I believe we have another question, this time from Peter Bouquet. I hope I'm not messing up your name there, Peter. And Peter's question is, what would be Android messaging share in APAC compared to global? I'm glad to get tired.
Mhm. Yeah, it depends on the market. In APAC, I think in some markets, iPhone penetration is still quite high. Sort of looking at markets like Australia, for example, but Android, yeah, is definitely higher in others. And obviously that sort of uh, plays out in the RCS space as well. But in terms of having an impact on how much RCS is potentially used. But yeah, I mean, I don't have that data offhand, but we do have that, and I can probably circle back with you on that offline as to exactly what that figure is. But yeah, in most countries in APAC, Android has a higher market share.
Well, that seems to be the extent of our questions from our audience. Pamela, I cannot thank you enough for your insightful and informational presentation. This has been wonderful. Where can anyone find any more of your analysis if they're looking to hear more about your expertise?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure to present today and to be a part of this LinkedIn Live session with you and with Sinch. So thank you for the opportunity to do that. Yeah, so I think if anybody wants to find out more information, obviously I'm available on LinkedIn. We have a few sort of reports that would be available from our website, so www.omdia.com. A lot of that is behind our paywall, unfortunately, but yeah, certainly reach out direct if there are questions that I can answer. I will do that. And yeah, so as I said, LinkedIn Live and our website LinkedIn connection or our website are probably the first go-to sources for more info and to connect.
Excellent. Thanks again. And thanks to everyone out there watching. It's been wonderful. And we're going to do this again. So stay tuned for our next LinkedIn Live. And until then, take care and have a great day. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.